J. Edgar Hoover was the FBI's director from May 10th, 1924 until May 2nd, 1972. As the most controversial FBI director, he drew much attention to the FBI and crime organizations because of the questionable decisions he made. Would you like to learn more about J. Edgar Hoover? Well, listen to this and you'll know more than you'd ever imagine about J. Edgar. Born on January 1st, 1895, Hoover was born and raised in Washington, D.C. Growing up, Hoover's father had a mental breakdown and was taken away from the family. His mother was unable to raise the Hoover family alone, and therefore life was tough for the entire family. This occurred when his older brother, Dickerson Naylor Jr., was 15, his sister Lillian was 12, and J. Edgar was 8. Hoover had a younger sister, Sadie Marguerite, but she had died at age 3 from diphtheria. As a teenager and young adult, Hoover never left Washington because of emotional ties to the city where he grew up and lost his father. In 1913, Hoover graduated as valedictorian of his Central High School class. While in high school, Hoover was a member of the Central High's undefeated debate team and captain of cadets. After high school, he lacked the funds needed for living expenses, and he was unable to accept a scholarship offer at the University of Virginia. Instead, he took a clerical position at the Library of Congress and enrolled in night classes to pursue a law degree. Hoover received his LLB and LLM degrees from George Washington University in 1917. Hoover had an uncle who was a judge and who helped him get a position at the Department of Justice on July 26, 1917. 2 years after in the department, he was made the special assistant to the Attorney General. Then he led the General Intelligence Division, or as known as GID. Mitchell Palmer, the Attorney General at the time, grew concerned about the Red Scare. This began when a bomb was placed at his home, and he feared it was put there by Russian communists, whom he thought would try to overthrow the U.S. government because of revolutions in Russia that had recently occurred. Mitchell Palmer recruited J. Edgar Hoover to help him with the notorious Palmer raids. They made a massive index over 450,000 people suspected of criminal activity or those against the government. Hoover gathered 6,000 of the people to arrest. He said they should be gathered and deported. He arrested anarchists, communists, as well as illegal aliens. When the GID was moved to the FBI, Attorney General Harlan Fiske appointed the young 29-year-old Hoover to become the FBI director. People questioned him for his new styles of capturing criminals. His style was to take every risk necessary and capture the criminal at all costs. Prior to Hoover, the FBI's philosophy was, do what you can. If you can't capture the criminal safely, then don't. Before Hoover took over as the director of the FBI, the office was much different. Agents weren't allowed to carry any firearms, and many arrests were left up to the local police to handle, not the government. Hoover fired agents he thought were unqualified and began new policies to run the agency. He was very good at organizing things, and this helped the office. He started special training for all personnel so that every agent received the same training. He started the use of scientific laboratories and created an accurate filing system as well as the top 10 most wanted list. The FBI became a world-class crime-fighting organization under Hoover. Though his style of catching criminals was questioned by most people, he executed these plans well. Hoover arrested John Dillinger, a famous bank robber, Al Capone, the leader of the criminal underworld, and Pretty Boy Floyd, a murderer and bank robber, and many other notorious criminals.
One of the most famous criminals captured by the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover was Alphonse Capone. Here is a more in-depth look in Al Capone's life and capture.
This is a story on J. Edgar Hoover and the notorious criminals he tracked down and captured. Al Capone was the son of an Italian immigrant born in 1899 in Brooklyn, New York. Capone was never a good student in school and quit school in the 6th grade. After he dropped out, he became a member of a notorious street gang led by Johnny Torrio and Lucky Luciano. In 1925, Torrio was seriously wounded in an assassination attempt and surrendered the Brooklyn mob to Capone. This was when Hoover took note on Capone, since Capone was now the leader of a mob, and Hoover was the FBI director since 1924, a year before the assassination attempt. Later in his life, Capone moved to Chicago and continued the mob when he moved. This gang became known as the Capone Gang. Capone and his mob's reputation grew for being the most ruthless and hardcore. Rival gangs are often eliminated by Capone's. The most famous gang elimination by Capone was the St. Valentine's Day Massacre on February 14, 1929. This happened when Capone's gang dressed up as police and lined rival gang members up against a wall. The men from Capone's gang used machine guns to kill all of the rival gang members. People argue it might not have been Capone since he was visiting his wife in Florida. Capone was brought into custody and sentenced to 80 days at Eastern State Penitentiary in Pennsylvania. Capone had a lavish cell with a radio, couch, and lamp. Here in his cell, Capone was said to have been haunted by Johnny Clark. Johnny Clark was the leader of the rival gang that was massacred on Valentine's Day. Every night, Capone would mysteriously scream, "I'm sorry, Johnny, you have to leave." These strange outbursts were reported by cell block wardens and other prisoners. After his release, Capone tried to stay under the radar, but Hoover was on his trail ever since the Torrio assassination attempt. Hoover eventually tracked down Capone and sent him to Alcatraz, where he spent his final days. However, Clark's ghost was still said to have haunted Capone until the day he died.
As we went into this project, we didn't know much about J. Edgar Hoover. However, we learned new facts and information about his personal life. As History Day theme of Revolution, React, and Reform relates to J. Edgar Hoover because Hoover revolutionized the FBI by changing organizations from one that had very little power to a crime-fighting organization. People reacted in different ways. Some thought he was the best thing that ever happened to the FBI, while others thought he was terrible and should have stepped down as director. But overall, in our project, we learned that Hoover was not only a respected FBI director, but he definitely was a different director. His tactics changed the FBI forever, and his legacy will remain forever.
Secret Asian man, they've given you a number and taken away your name.